Hello, music fans. I'm here to talk to you about my favorite bands that start with the letter S. My favorite would be Symphony X, and this is their album Paradise Lost, which is my favorite of theirs. They have a lot of great work. All of their albums are great. The guitar work of Michael Romeo is incredible. The vocals of Russell Allen are great. So they're a solid progressive metal band. They've got some power metal influences, some neoclassical and symphonic influences. Their first album doesn't have Russell Allen on vocals, so for that reason is my least favorite. But everything else that they've done since then is just amazing stuff. And my second favorite band that starts with S is this one, System of a Down. This is their album Mesmerize, which is my favorite by them, but I like all of their albums as well. They're an alternative metal band, sometimes called new metal. I don't call them new metal, but some other people do. Some of their stuff is borderline like poppy, but some of it's progressive. It's weird. They're funny. They have influences from Armenian folk music mixed in with their metal. It's a pretty eclectic band. They've released 5 albums and then went on hiatus in 2006 and never released any new full albums since then, though they did release 2 new singles recently in 2020. And they do still tour, but they haven't made new music in new full-length albums in over 15 years. So maybe one day we'll get a new full-length album from them. That would be great. Now time for some honorable mentions. I have a lot of them. There's a lot of great bands that start with S. Let's start out on the prog side. One that I have to mention is Steven Wilson. He was the founding member of Porcupine Tree, and then he went off and had an excellent solo career as well. Most of his music is progressive rock, although lately his last 2 albums I wouldn't say are as progressive. They've kind of more shifted towards art rock and pop, or progressive pop maybe. They're not the typical 70s progressive rock style that some of his earlier solo works were. My favorite solo album of his would be The Raven That Refused to Sing, although I also really like Hand Cannot Erase. So those are his third and fourth albums, and he's made 6. Keeping it on the progressive side, but this time going more of a metal direction, I've got Sixth on my list. They are a British progressive metal band. Got some hints of mathcore, some weird avant-garde stuff. They usually do weird spoken word tracks on a lot of their albums, but they're one of the few bands that when they do spoken word, it actually keeps my interest, because they put a lot of guitar pedal effects on the vocals, and their lyrics and poetry are interesting, and just the delivery of the spoken word is very cool with this band. And then their music and their guitar playing is just incredible. They're potentially one of the pioneers of djent, as they kind of started out in 1999. Them and Meshuggah are kind of the first bands I know of to do the djent sound. Sixth made their first album in 2003. The Trees Are Dead and Dried Out, Wait for Something Wild. And that would be my favorite album of theirs. It's very, very cool, innovative for its time. Another progressive metal band, Sky Harbor, is great. They featured Dan Tompkins of Tesseract on vocals for some of their albums, but now the vocalist is, what's their name now? Eric Emery, who's also good. I like Tesseract stuff better than Sky Harbor, but they're both great bands. I've seen them both live, and they're really solid progressive metal with the djenty rhythms. Another progressive metal band with some genty rhythms would be the Safety Fire. Although they don't exist anymore, they made 2 albums and then they disbanded in 2015. My favorite album of theirs would be Grind the Ocean. And one more progressive metal, or no, I think I have a few more progressive metal bands. Another one is Soen from Sweden. They're a progressive metal. It's kind of a super group almost with some former members of Opeth in the band. They sound kind of like the riffs of Opeth with the vocals of Tool, maybe. Yeah, that's probably a good description. And 2 more bands on the progressive side. One would be Sordid Pink, which is a female-fronted progressive metal band. They're like gent pop, I would say. The vocals are mostly sound like they could be pop radio vocals, except she also screams from time to time too. But most of her stuff is really catchy, hooky singing with genty grooves behind it. And last genty progressive metal band to mention would be Shattered Skies, which is another great band. Now, for those people who aren't as into the progressive side of things, got some other bands that start with S for you to check out in some other different varieties of genres. It's a big letter today. I still have 7 other bands to mention. I'll try to rifle through them so this video doesn't get too long. One of them is Sigur Rose, the Icelandic post-rock band. They have really high-pitched vocals, kind of art rock, sound a little bit like Radiohead, but mixed with like dream pop and ambient and post-rock stuff. Very cool band. My favorite album of theirs would be the one from 2008. It's very hard for me to pronounce because I don't speak Icelandic, but maybe something like Med Sud I Erum Vid Spillum Endelaust. I don't know how to say it, but it's a great album. On the emo and post-hardcore side, we've got Silverstein, which is another great band, and my favorite album of theirs would be A Shipwreck in the Sand from 2009. On the kind of mathcore and metalcore side, Straight Reads the Line was a Canadian band. I think they only ever made 1 album, The Author, and it's really amazing. It's I don't know, it's just one of the best metalcore, mathcore albums out there. Probably in my top 200 albums of all time as well. And this band, they managed to stay on my radar even though they only ever made 1 album. And Serj Tankian, the frontman of System of a Down, his solo work deserves a nod here. It's kind of, he has a wide variety of stuff. He does alternative metal, but he also does kind of just hard rock stuff, but he also does classical and like film scores and stuff. And he does electronic stuff and jazz even, and yeah, he likes to experiment with genres, and it's pretty interesting. I prefer his rock and metal stuff over his classical and electronic and jazz, but it's cool that he's trying different things. 3 more bands to go here. One of them is Strapping Young Lad, a band formed by Devin Townsend. They're like industrial metal, extreme metal, thrash metal kind of band. Really cool, heavy stuff. I prefer Devin Townsend's solo work over most of his solo work. I prefer over Strapping Young Lad. I'm not as big on his Devin Townsend solo albums that are like ambient noise, like Dead Lab and The Hummer. I really don't like those at all. But all his other solo albums, I like them usually better than Strapping Young Lad albums. But Strapping Young Lad's cool. Devin Townsend's a great vocalist, good guitar player, really good songwriter. So really interesting to hear all his work. And second from last here, I've got Steve Vai on my list. He makes mostly instrumental music. He's had some albums that have vocals on them, but he's just a virtuosic guitar player. He makes like hard rock, heavy metal, progressive rock kind of music. Um, Pretty adventurous guitar playing for sure. And last on my list for today of great bands to start with the letter S, I've got Soilwork, the Swedish melodic death metal band. They Their career kind of reminds me of In Flames a lot, in that their early stuff is kind of melodic death metal, but then they kind of have later some more alternative metal and more catchy pop chorus vocal type things and more radio friendly, and a little bit of metalcore influence, kind of like the direction In Flames went in. But I like all of Soilwork and all of In Flames work in all the genres. I know the melodic death metal purists probably prefer just the early stuff for both of those bands, but I'll give it all a chance. And that's it for today. Great bands that start with the letter S. I know there's probably a lot more, but I just wanted to stop there. Those are the ones that came to mind for me. In the next video, we'll talk about the letter T. Peace out.